Hello and welcome to episode number 60 of the CRM MVP podcast. Today, we will be covering, as I mentioned on the last episode, part 2 of our conversation about skills solution architects must have in order to, well, do their job as a solution architect. And on the last episode, episode 59, we talked about the top 10 things solution architects must know. If you haven't listened to episode 59, I encourage you to stop listening to this one. Go back and listen to episode 59 and then come back and listen to this part 2. This one will be focused on the top 10 overrated skills for solution architects, right? And these are the things that, again, a lot of people think that they have to have in order to be a solution architect. I even think solution architects themselves think that the time they have invested on gaining these skills is actually something they had to have. And I don't think they have to have it. And by the way, I want to start by saying that all of the skills that we're going to be talking about on this list, they're overrated for the reason that I don't think you have to have them in order to be an effective solution architect. I don't think that's the case at all. I think that, you should have some skills, but if you don't have these, you can still be pretty effective at your job as a solution architect. Now, can you be effective as your job as a developer? Not really. And that's because number one on the list is development, right? Now, can you be an effective solution architect if you are an expert developer? Yes, I think so. I mean, if you have expert development background, but you also have all the skills that we talked about on episode 59 as a solution architect, you have industry expertise, you know how to lead and own the result of the solution, you understand advanced level of customization and configuration, you understand licensing, you know all of the things that we talked about on the last episode. If you have all those skills, plus you happen to be an expert developer, that's pretty awesome, because as you design solutions, you'll know what's possible from the code perspective, but also what's possible out of the box. Because if you remember last episode, number one was understanding primary applications and what's possible essentially out of the box. So I think development is the number one most overrated skill that you think you need as a solution architect. Do you have to be a developer or know how to code to be an effective solution architect? Not at all. Not at all. And again, I think that some people will disagree with me. I think that some people will be on the perspective that you can't be a solution architect if you're not a developer, if you know what's possible to extend the solution, Dynamics 365. And I may disagree with you a little bit on that. I think that you should know what's possible. I think that as a solution architect, it's good to know when something needs to be done customization based or extension based, code based, plugins, whatever, that it is not possible out of the box. I think that you should know that. But the beauty of Dynamics 365, and I talked about this on the video that I recorded with Seth Bacon, the video I mentioned on the last episode on how do you become a solution architect, which again continues to get a ton of views. So thank you guys for that. But on that video, I mentioned that we're super lucky when it comes to Dynamics 365, because the things that Dynamics 365 doesn't do out of the box, and again, I'm talking about when you're on a project, when you're implementing Dynamics 365, the things that Dynamics 365 doesn't do out of the box are things that it does by extending it. It is very, very, very rare to find something that it's impossible to do in Dynamics 365 by either out of the box or extending the functionality. Typically, because it's a website pretty much, you can code anything for it. And I realize that some things are not done by Dynamics 365. I realize that in some cases, some of the requirements during a Dynamics 365 implementation may be outside of the scope of Dynamics 365. Like, for example, I'm working with a customer right now that has super important and valid requirements when it comes to document management. But a lot of the requirements, even though this is being approached as a Dynamics 365 implementation, are actually SharePoint requirements, meaning those requirements will be satisfied, but they will be satisfied by SharePoint functionality. So as long as some other solution does it, it's still part of, as long as another application does it, it's still part of your solution. It's still part of the implementation that you're doing. So, it is really rare to find a requirement that is just impossible to do. Like, we can't do that. Luckily, I guess, for me, recently, and by recently I mean this year, I found one of those requirements. I found a requirement that I couldn't do with any functionality, not coded or anything like that. And without giving too much information, I'll just say that this company that I work with, that I'm working with still to this day, they have partnerships with other companies. I'm just gonna keep it at that level. That other company uses a different CRM system, not Salesforce, not in the cloud. It's just an on-premise system. It's a popular one. Again, I just don't want to give a lot of information because the privacy of our customers is sacrosanct. I'm not going to jeopardize that. But let's just say they're using a third-party CRM system, another CRM system, not a Microsoft one, and not a cloud one like Salesforce. And in order for them to access this system, they have to go through Citrix to access it. And it's behind the scenes, is all protected by Citrix, and they wanted to integrate with that system, and just wasn't able to do it. And that's because, again, we would be integrating with a system that is hosted by another company behind the scenes, not internet facing at all, and they are not willing to allow us to connect remotely from the internet, or even using hybrid connection through Azure or anything like that. They wouldn't allow us to gain access to the backend, to the database, to be able to pull the information that we needed, or to be able for us to send them the information that we wanted to synchronize to it. So as of now, and the way it works is essentially information we enter in Dynamics 365 Online needs to be entered manually. Not all of it, just some information for this partner, it needs to be provided. So if you think about it, again, I'm trying to keep this in general terms, but if you think about, let's say you sell things for multiple clients or something, multiple vendors out there, right? And you need to report to that vendor whenever there's an opportunity to sell their products. So if that's the case, you need to report to the vendor. So what we wanted to do is be able to put in our opportunities in Dynamics, and then have the opportunities where I pick that vendor, be automatically transferred to their own CRM system, and say, we have this opportunity closing this date for this amount, and here are the products that they're interested on, something like that. So just to give you clarity. So we couldn't do that because of limitations on their partner side. So my customer's partner side. I'll just leave it at that. But that is very rare. That doesn't happen often. It doesn't happen often that you have no solution for it. There's typically a solution, even though the solution might be a third-party solution. Sometimes, the requirement for the customer will be something that needs a third-party solution, an ISV solution, or it needs to be customized from scratch, or it needs to be purchased, or whatever it is. But there's typically a solution. It's not common to find something that is not there. So once again, I think that having developer skills is overrated. For solution architects, I would not spend time becoming a better developer. I talked about this on the video. Again, if you want to go ahead and watch it, look at the description of this episode. I dropped the video there. And again, please subscribe to our channel to let us know that you're watching, and so we can keep producing videos as well for you. And again, I talked about it on the episode about the fact that, Tom Brady, who's a quarterback, is the example that I use, the best ever potentially to play the game. He's just not spending time working on other skills except for passing the ball, which is what he does better than potentially anyone else in history. And he still continues to work on that rather than, getting better on the things he doesn't do very well. So I think that if you're a solution architect and you're not a developer, you don't need to take development courses. I don't think that in order for you to design an effective solution, you need to be an expert developer. Now, do you need to know what's possible by extending the functionality? Yes, I think so. But a lot of that knowledge that comes from, how do you know what you need to do to extend the functionality? A lot of that knowledge comes from just understanding what's possible out of the box, which, if you can tell, is essentially the first thing we talked about in the last episode, which is knowing what's out of the box. And if you extend that to customization and configuration, if you know what's possible, and as I mentioned in the last episode, I think I consider myself to be about 90% there, to know everything that you can do out of the box. By knowing a lot of what you can do out of the box, I think that you have a good idea of what can be done outside the box, because in most cases the answer will be yes, we can do it. It just needs to be done via code. It needs to be a developer doing that. Do you need to be the one writing the code? I don't think so. Now, I've worked in the past with really, really good solution architects who either used to be developers or who have spent a lot of time writing code. I have worked with solution architects who are total studs, go-getters. Like, I need a plugin for this, I'm going to go write it. I don't think you need to do that to be effective. I think even those same solution architects, which are, again, the best out there and I have great respect for, I don't think they would be less of a solution architect or less of the amazing solution architects they are, because if they didn't know how to code that, plugin or whatever it is. I just don't think that's the case. I don't think you need to know that. I think that's overrated. It's great that you can do it. For me, I think going to computer engineering school and writing a lot of code during my 5 years that I went to college or to university did two things for me. Number one, it taught me that I don't want to code for a living. I thought it was boring for me, and I'm a total weird guy about this, by the way. Every time I have an assignment, I kind of tend to sit down and get it done. And whenever it had to do with coding, I remember a project we did. I don't remember if this was programming 1 or programming 2. It was one of those classes about programming. They asked us to code an ATM, the software for an ATM. That was the project assignment. And I think I spent either 2 or 3 days nonstop, almost no sleep. I only slept whenever I just couldn't think anymore, because you essentially stop being, stop thinking right. Stop being, I'm trying to find the word for it, but I guess it goes with imagination or creative. That's the word I'm looking for. You stop being creative. So you cannot force creativity. If you're too tired, there's no way you can force yourself to be creative. That is one of those things that you can force. It's you can't fake bravery. It's the same thing. Even if you're faking bravery by stepping in a moment of, commotion or emergency, and you're I'm not a brave person, but I'm going to fake it and I'm going to step in and save the day. By faking bravery, you're still being brave. It's the same with creativity. You cannot force it. You have to be on the right state of mind and the right place to be able to do it. So I remember this project where I had to, build the software for an ATM. And if you have ever pulled money out of an ATM or deposited a check on an ATM, you know all of the different, options that you have for it. Not only you can do deposits, you can do withdrawals. With the withdrawals, we had to deliver or develop the the common amounts. If you ever take money out, it would say do you want $20, $40, $60, all the way to $200, and then you have a custom thing, and you can pick that. We had the ability to pick multiple accounts. We had the ability to pick have the code, figure out if you were trying to extract more money than you had on your account. So a ton of check conditions in place. Also, we had to deal with the fact that our code could not be run from 2 different machines at the same time on the same account. So for example, 2 people trying to get, $200 out of 2 different ATMs at the same time. Let's say an account that had $220 and you were trying to go and get $200 cash out of it. Well, if you were trying to do it at the same time with, let's say, two cards, like if you and your wife have a card for the same account, okay, what if we stand next to each other on two different ATMs? We try to take $200 at the same time. Can we rob the bank, essentially? So the code needed to be able to lock in accounts while it was taking the money out, only one lock at a time. Anyway, it was super complicated. So I spent days on this thing. It was like a zombie. I was completely out of my mind just working on this thing for days. And I definitely did not want to do that for a living forever. Like, I did it for the project. I think they got me on a few things. Like, I think it was something stupid. Like the professor, and obviously on a real ATM you don't have an option to do minus, but when you have a keyboard you can do it. So I think he tried to do like a minus deposit. It ended up like adding the deposit but subtracting the money. He got me on something, and I got like a C or whatever. The equivalent of that is I passed the class. Obviously, I graduated in 2003, but it was one of those things where I was like, F this. Like, I don't want to be a developer for a living. But that was one thing he did. The second thing he did is that he taught me that development, regardless of the language that you use, is all about logic, and that you can read this stuff, right? Even if you're not an expert on whatever language it is, you're looking at JavaScript, you're looking at HTML, you're looking at whatever, you can kind of read what it is. And then you use tools like I like to use Notepad++, which allows me to color coded by the language the actual code is on. So when you put it on in colors, it will go ahead and give you kind of the building blocks of the code. You can kind of read it. So I think that helps, especially when it comes to troubleshooting. If you're trying to test a solution, it's not working right, well, let me go and open the code and see what's in there, see if I can spot where the problem is at, where it's breaking. That makes sense. I'm not the best at it. I can tell you that, and that's because I'm not a developer. But in a lot of cases, I can spot it. I can identify the issue. I can ask the developers to fix it, and, that's what it is. But then in a lot of cases, I look at it, I'm like, I don't see the problem. I don't see what it is. And then somebody will look at it and be like, oh, it's supposed to be a comma instead of a semicolon or something. Like, they would spot something silly like that, and I just spent 2 hours trying to troubleshoot something, and it was something stupid like that. So, development. I think this is the longest case for you don't need development ever, right? 16 minutes talking about that. Okay, number 2, portals. Do you have to be an expert in portals? No, absolutely not. I think that we have super, super talented people out there that know portals very well. I know what portals are. I know what portals can do. I know how portals can help a solution in an organization. I mean, I've had projects where the company I was working with didn't even think about portals. Like, they weren't even that wasn't even in their thought process at all. But when I start talking to them about their challenges and what are some of the outcomes they expect from the solution that we're implementing, it's clear to me that a portal will be a blessing for them, right? We need a portal. We need a portal for your vendors. We need a portal for your partners. We need a portal for your customers. Whatever it is, we need a portal. So I think that understanding and identifying the fact that you need a portal, it's what's important. I don't think you need to know how to set them up, configure them, and all of that. And for me, I know enough to be dangerous, meaning I can install the portals, I can customize them out of the box, but I don't know Liquid. I don't know all the other stuff and it might be simple stuff. And I'm pretty sure that if I go on Google or Bing and I, search my way through it, I can figure it out. But I don't think I'm a better solution architect if I knew that. And again, I've worked with solution architects in the past who are amazing at portals. They're really, really good. And they can do the portal implementation themselves. And that's awesome. If you have the skills, go for it. But if you're already a solution architect and you can check the box for the 10 things we talked about on episode 59, will I then go and pursue becoming an expert in portals? No, I think it will be a waste of your time. I think that's overrated skills. That's my opinion. And yes, there's super exciting stuff out there. There's power portals now, right? Where we can leverage Power Apps to create our own portals and stuff like that and allow customers to access our Power Apps and obviously interact with data in Dynamics 365 or CDS, depending on what you're using. All of that stuff is exciting. The fact that I just told you that is what you need to know as a solution architect. Do you need to know how to create a Power Portal from beginning to end? I don't think so. I think that identifying the need for it and understanding how is a piece of your puzzle in this solution that you have created is important. That part is important because it's what makes or break your solution. But knowing how to do it, I don't think is that important. I think it's overrated. So that's why it's number 2. Number 3, this is an interesting one. This one make the list. And by the way, this list, just like the previous episode, it's just a bunch of different things I wrote and then I had to remove some of them. Number 3 is interesting because this one I've heard several times. And this one also applies to being an MVP, by the way. So if I ever record a top 10 overrated skills for MVPs or overrated things that MVPs or that you think you need to have to become an MVP. If I ever do that episode, and by the way, this could be a total series, top 10, skills you need to have for CRM administrator, for developer, for project manager, for salesperson, whatever, and top 10 overrated skills for those same roles. I think we can do a few episodes about this one. So hopefully no one else steals my idea about the top 10 overrated and must-have skills for roles. But maybe I can bring a Neil and do one for Scrum and for project management. We'll see how that one goes. But again, going back to number 3, this is one of those things that I think a lot of people think you need to have. And, for MVPs, it's the same thing. I keep hearing about like, well, I want to be an MVP, but I'm really bad at talking to people or whatever. You don't have to have this one to be an effective solution architect or be an effective MVP, and that is public speaking. Public speaking meaning standing in front of a room and talking about what you're doing or something like that. I think that listening is more important to be an effective solution architect than speaking. Last week, or maybe it was the week before that, I stood in front of a room for a customer. We had, I don't know, 600 to 800 people. I don't remember. It was a big room. It's one of the biggest audiences that I've had before. I think the biggest one was about 1,000, but it was a big room, and it's good to be able to stand there and talk about the solution you have created and how it's going to help them and help them be more effective at their job and all of that. Is good to have. I'm not saying you shouldn't have it or don't worry about it, but I think that being a good public speaker and be able to stand in a room, it's overrated when it comes to being an effective solution architect. Does the fact that I like standing in front of a room full of people at the CRMG Summit or Dynamics 365 Saturday or whatever, does the fact that I like doing that and speaking and I actually like it, I love it to stand in a room and be able to answer your questions live and all of that, does that help me as a solution architect? Maybe a little bit, maybe in some cases, but does it make me a more effective solution architect? I don't think so. I think it's kind of overrated. If you're not good at public speaking, will I, go and do training and take therapy and watch a bunch of YouTube videos and TED Talks to see if I can get better at public speaking because that will make me more effective at designing a solution that is effective for the company? I don't think so. I think you should do it just to improve your public speaking. That's different because public speaking works in every scenario, right? You might be, talking to a family, doing a toast at a wedding, whatever. And if you can stand there in front of a bunch of people and, not stutter and be weird, right, about your speech, then that's a good thing. And sometimes, I've seen it before. I struggle, even with my kids, with my daughter sometimes to do a school project or whatever where she's going to have to stand in front of the class and she struggles with it. And I try to teach her. So I think becoming a better public speaker is a good thing. I don't think that's an overrated skill. I think that's a good skill to have, that you can stand in front of 10,000 people or whatever, doesn't matter, and talk like no big deal. That's good to have. But I don't think that will make you a more effective solution architect. I mean, I think it could, but I don't think is super important. Listening to your customer, understanding their challenges, understanding what solution you need to create based on the 10 things we talked about on the last episode, and coming up with the best solution, the best plan to deliver that solution to the customer and make sure they adopt it. All those things are way more important than being able to stand in front of a room and talking. Now, I will say that if you're a good public speaker, it would definitely help you in terms of getting people to pay attention to you and learning about the solution that you're about to deliver, getting people excited about spending time. It's really hard to talk to someone who has a full-time job and tell them that you're going to need them at least 4 hours a week for the next 2 months as you do Q&A in the system, because they are the users and they are the ones who should say if this stuff works or not. It doesn't sound very appealing to a lot of people. But if you're good at public speaking and you can stand in front of the room and say, all 20 of you have been selected to be, the leaders of this testing. I've selected you because you're a power, whatever it is, however you do it. But if you get people excited about it, then you get better results. So I think it's a good skill. I just think it's overrated for solution architects. Number 4, on-prem infrastructure knowledge. And this goes for CRM on-premise, obviously, but it also goes for other systems too. Do you need to be an expert in Active Directory to be a better solution architect? Do you need to be an expert in Exchange, assuming they have Exchange on-premise? Do you need to be an expert in Citrix or Cisco or firewalls and all that stuff? I don't think so. Is it good to have? Absolutely. And that's how I started, in Dynamics. I was an expert on everything but Dynamics, right? I was a trainer. I was teaching people how to set up, implement, and maintain Microsoft Exchange, Microsoft ISO Server, Microsoft SharePoint, SQL Server, and obviously domain controllers with Active Directory and setting up clusters and doing things like that. I was an infrastructure guy. That's what I was doing, right? Teaching people how to do that and implementing it myself. Then from there, I was hired by a company who asked me if I knew Dynamics. And I said, well, I have installed it and administrated, but that's pretty much it. And they said, well, do you know how to implement it, for a bunch of different companies or different sizes and whatever? I said, no, all I did was one for one small company. And they said, don't worry, we'll teach you everything. So I came in as an infrastructure guy, and my infrastructure knowledge has helped me over time, definitely. But it helps me navigate the complexities of working with IT departments, dealing with security. It's always interesting when you're trying to set up, let's say, server-side sync, and you're on premise, and you give them a list of minimum requirements for security, for permissions, like we need to set up these service accounts, they need to have these permissions, etc. And they say, well, no, that's too much. What's the minimum? Or what happens if I don't give them those permissions? And to be able to have that conversation and not just to be able to say what you're thinking, which is, well, if you want it not to work, then give them less permissions, right? That's what you want to say. But you don't say that, right? You want to have a better conversation, a more friendly conversation with IT people when it comes to infrastructure. But there's always going to be someone out there that can bring that skill set. I don't think that you as a solution architect need to know that stuff. I think it's a bonus, right? The fact that I can go and talk to somebody about Citrix, for example, because I'm a certified Citrix integration architect. Before I did Dynamics, I was full-on blown expert Citrix implementer and teacher. But again, I switched to Dynamics, and now every time there's Citrix on an implementation, I'm all over that because I know that world very well. Is that a plus? Yes, it's a plus to have. Is it a requirement? No, I think it's overrated. I think that my Citrix skills are overrated when it comes to being a solution architect for Dynamics 365. So having that information, like I love, let's say, Chris Cognetta. I love Chris. He's awesome. He's also an MVP. He hosted one of these shows about moving from on-premise to the cloud. Amazing when it comes to infrastructure. Perhaps the best infrastructure guys from all of the MVPs. Tons and tons of experience with on-premise. I don't think he would use a whole lot of that knowledge to be a solution architect. If I get into a project where I'm a solution architect and I have a customer, which I've done in the past, by the way, and I work with a customer who has these super complex questions about infrastructure that I don't even know about, I call Chris because I know he'll know it. He's awesome at it. But you don't have to have that. So again, being better on premise, learning about clusters and firewalls and, certificates and all of that. I don't think you should spend any time on that. Just get Chris, give him a call, send him a tweet, whatever. Get Chris to help you. Just skip the whole training. Focus on something else. Okay, number 5, and we talked about this one kind of on the last episode, is data integration technologies, right? We talked about data integration being a must have when it comes to knowledge, understanding how to leverage it on the on your solution, rather, understanding how you're going to be able to use it, whether it's real-time, near real-time batches, one way, two ways, like all of that stuff. Understanding that is important. Understanding the actual technology, like what's the best way to do it, that's not your job. That's a technical architect. Let somebody with that knowledge figure that out. And I love to do that. I practice decentralized command, as you guys know. So I'm all about, look, we need to integrate with the system. It needs to be real time and it needs to be two ways. Got it? You figure out how to do that. Whether that is code, Kingsway Soft, Flow, I don't care how he does it, as long as it does it. So I make the requirement based on the solution, based on the architecture that I've developed, I've created for this particular customer or this particular project. And then a technical architect will figure out what's the best way to do it. And by the way, in some cases, the customer will figure out the best way to do it, because it's a server or a service inside the house, is internally, or is hosted on their own data center or something like that. They're like, okay, what do you need? You need to connect to this database. Okay, I'll make it happen. Don't worry, I'll surface it. I'll run a query that copies it in another table. Like, the customer sometimes will step up and actually take over the lead for the technology side of it. The what kind of application we use for this thing, part of it, the customer will do it. Doesn't happen often though, but I do work with some amazing customers sometimes that they do it. But in the cases that I can't, I use a technical architect. I'll call Daryl Labar, right, at Gap Integrity, and be like, Daryl, I need you in this project because this thing is insane. I need a technical architect. And Daryl will come and rock the house, right, because he's awesome. So that's how you do it. You want to bring in someone who has the skills. I think that you gaining those skills is overrated. That's why data integration technologies is number 5 on the list. Number 6, this one might be a little controversial because I believe you need to have some skills, but I think being an expert at it is overrated, and that is project management. Do you have to be a PM, certified project management institute, professional in order to be an effective solution architect? No, I don't think so. Again, being a solution architect is all about implementing an effective solution. And obviously, delivering a solution that is useful, which is your job, on time and on budget, is being effective at your job. So you need to work with project managers along the way. You need to be able to manage your time properly and to be able to prioritize the things that you're working on in order to deliver them on time and when they're expected. Other teams might be depending on you to do it. So you have to have that level of skill to not be the bottleneck that people are waiting on to be able to finish the project, right? I personally went through project management training, but I didn't go get certified or took, any workshop after that or worked as a project manager on a project. What I wanted to do was understand what was important for project managers. And by the way, this was online on demand. This wasn't in person, workshop or anything like that. I took an on-demand course. I wanted to know how I can work better with project managers because they're in my team, but you don't need to be a project manager. Now, if you're a solution architect that used to be an engagement manager or a project manager, a PM, right, and you're certified and you know everything there is to know about project management, that's good. That's good to have. I'm not discouraging you from having that background. That's great. It's kind of like the on-prem infrastructure background. The fact that I have that is great, but it's overrated to be a solution architect. I think that being an expert project manager would be overrated to be a good solution architect. I think that that's why you rely on your engagement manager from the partner side, or you rely on the project manager from the customer side, or whatever it is. And if it's a small project, you should be able to manage and deliver on time. So have enough skills to deal with a small scale project on your own, or leverage an engagement manager on a large one, and know how to work with them, know what's important to them, know that, in a lot of cases, and this is not true for every single project manager out there, but for the majority of them, in a lot of cases, communication is key. When things are going good, communicate. When things are going bad, communicate. When nothing is happening or you're waiting on somebody or whatever, communicate. So understanding that, over communicate where things are, keeping people on top of, up to date, on top of things, is very, very important. That is good to know as a solution architect, but I think trying to be an expert, like sometimes I talk to people and say, oh, I'm a certified project manager and I deliver projects now. I'm a solution architect. It's like, so, I mean, it would be like if you were a certified accountant. I mean, it's cool, but it doesn't really, unless you deploy Dynamics 365 for accounting firms, then that's respect. Awesome. Good job. That goes with the industry information, industry skills and best practices, the knowledge that we talked about on episode 59. So good for you. But yeah, I don't think you have to be an expert in project management to be an effective solution architect. So that's number 6. Number 7 is, and this one is an interesting one. So I didn't know how to write it, but I wrote it like connections to important people in the industry. So what I mean by that is, for me, at least, being effective as a solution architect, which means delivering an effective solution, sometimes requires that I leverage connections and people that I know in the industry. I'm not going to drop any names because I want to keep working with people. And I don't want them to be flooded by, people reaching out to them and saying like, oh, so you work with partners? Like, cool. You should work with me. I'm not going to do that. Just like, I don't want anyone to give me your connections. Actually, I lied. Give me your connections. I want to use them. But I'm not going to give you my connections. But there are some times that I will reach out to either Microsoft, or if I'm using a third-party ISV solution, I'll know somebody who works there or whatever, and I will leverage my connections in order to make sure the project is successful. So I guess the easiest way to generalize this is, if I'm implementing a third-party solution, I might be able to reach out to someone who works there for a little bit of extra set of eyes, maybe look to make sure that it's done correctly, or can you spend 30 minutes to do a little bit of extra training here with the customer because they're going to own their solution. And I did the training, but it would be good to have a little bit extra, right, from someone who works with the third-party solution in and out. Or if I'm working with Microsoft and I'm implementing, let's say, the LinkedIn Sales Navigator, just to name the first thing that pops in my head, it will be good that I can, I have somebody that I can reach out to and say, look, my customer has a couple questions about the LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Can somebody else jump in there and stuff? Like, that's great to have. The fact that you have connections like that is great to have, but I think is overrated for you to be a solution architect. And what I mean by that is, before I was an MVP, and before I had the connections I have, the network that I've built over time, through trust and essentially doing my job well, and people being willing to help me continue doing my job well, that I didn't have all along. I wasn't born with my connections to people at Microsoft and third-party ISVs. That's not how it works. You build them over time. And before I built my connections, I was a solution architect. I was still implementing solutions. I would rely on others within the company I was working for, or rely on me and my own research skills, trying to find out people on Twitter or LinkedIn to find out who was responsible for something, and I would reach out to them. Like today, I can call somebody, literally I have their personal phone number, to ask them a question that a few years ago I had to send via email on LinkedIn because I didn't know if they would respond to me. But I've asked so many questions and built that relationship that now I can actually call them. So you don't have to have the connections out there in order to deliver an effective project. I think that you can do it without the connections because I did it in the past. I think that the projects that I failed in the past as a solution architect, which I've done before, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that every single implementation I've ever done has been successful since day one. That's not true. But a lot of those didn't fail because I didn't have the right connections. They failed because I just wasn't experienced enough, or I didn't have enough knowledge, or I was over my head, or I just didn't know what I didn't know, right? I created a solution to the best of my ability, and then, 2 years later, I'm like, man, if I could go back and redo that project now that I know what I know, the solution will be way better. And it was effective. Like the customer used it, and they are, they might be doing more manual work than now I could do automatic. So, it's always, I'm very, very self-critical. I like to go back and look and think about what can I do better. I do it with my projects. I do it with my sessions that I deliver at the summits. And it's always cool, like when you get reviews and I'm 5 stars or whatever, and best session of the event or whatever. But then you looking back, you're like, I should have talked a little bit more about that. I should have, enhanced this content. I had too many slides about this. Whatever it is, it's always good to try to improve. I think that if you think you're best at what you are forever and there's no margin to grow, I think you're delusional. So when it comes to connections to important people in the industry, it's good to have connections. I need more connections. Obviously, as I mentioned, it's always important to keep growing. But if you don't have a network like that, it doesn't mean that you can't be effective. I think that having those connections is overrated. If you have them, cool. But if not, you can still design a really awesome solution that your customer loves it, your users love working with, your customer can depend on. So you don't have to worry about having a network in order to be effective. Number 8, and this might be a little bit older, depending on what comes to mind when I mention this, but I'm talking about overall report writing. I think is overrated, and I'm talking about knowing how to create those reports in Power BI Desktop, for example. Knowing how to create those reports by creating your own SSRS reports that run in the system. Knowing how to create your own custom dashboards and charts, which we have tools like the chart editor on the XRM toolbox that you can use to create your own custom things, because as you know, out of the box, Dynamics 365 doesn't really give us a whole lot of options when it comes to creating our own charts and dashboards. So in a lot of cases, you need to customize them a little bit. But if you don't know how to do that, if you need somebody like Ulrich, the CRM chart guy, or some expert within your company to be able to help you create them, that's okay too. I think that identifying the things that you need and then asking for help from someone else who knows how to do it, I think that's more important. Like identifying those needs, it's more important than actually knowing how to do it. I still do it today. Like I think I'm decent with Power BI and dashboards and charts and whatever. I wouldn't call myself the best ever or the best expert ever. I let other people, call themselves that, or if claim the fame to that. I don't think I'm the best at it, but I'm decent at it, and I still all of the time ask for help, either to Ulrich or whoever it is out there that I consider to be a leader in when it comes to business intelligence or whatever. Scott Sewell, for example, it's amazing at it. I will go and reach out. Hey, Scott, I'm trying to create this thing. What do you think? Am I on the right path or the right direction? Like a couple weeks ago, rather, I reached out to Ulrich and I said, hey, Ulrich, I'm trying to do this thing. I'm thinking about doing this solution. Is that what you think is best? And he came back and he's like, no, I would use a pivot table. I think he said I think in this case, for this particular reason, I was trying to do it in Power BI. And he said, for this particular requirement, I would use a pivot table. I think that will work better. And I looked at it and I'm like, yeah, you're right. So even to be able to reach back out and ask for, directions and second thoughts, second opinions on things that you're trying to create, I think that's healthy. I don't think you need to be an expert in report writing to be a great solution architect. Now, do I wish I had the knowledge that Scott Sewell and Ulrich, have in order to create better Power BI visualization stuff? Of course, I would like to have that, but I don't think I'm a less of a solution architect because I don't have their level of knowledge. So again, I think writing reports from scratch, especially SSRS reports, it's overrated. Just get someone to do it for you. Identify that you need a custom report, have someone else write it. That's good enough. That you did your job, you created an effective solution. So that's the way I see it. All right, number 9, we're getting to the end of our list. Number 9 is mobility. Like being an expert on mobility, I think is overrated. I think it's important for you to know what the mobile application can do. I think it's important for you to know that, mobile clients support multiple forms and that you can leverage the main forms on the regular clients, and the fact that you can use some the main forms on the mobile clients, the fact that you can use some customizations on the mobile client that you can't use on a desktop, those things are all good. The fact that you can run Power Apps in mobile clients, and you can also run them on desktop, but I'm just talking about, leveraging the fact that you have a cell phone in your pocket that you can take and, use the capabilities of the mobile device, like taking pictures, recording audio, video, etc. Like leveraging those things is good to have, but you don't need to be an expert in mobile technologies. Like sometimes I hear people, it's like, well, should I attend the 5-day workshop on, Resco so I know how to, what's possible in the mobile? No, I don't think so. I don't think you need that. If you do it and you get that knowledge, awesome, good. That's going to be good to have. But I don't think I think it will be overrated. Like, oh, you're an expert in Woodford and Resco clients. That's cool. You're an expert on Canvas applications. You can create anything. That's cool. Are you a better solution architect because you're the world's best expert in Canvas applications? I don't think so. Not for Dynamics 365. For Canvas solution architect, yes, you definitely, that would help you if that's, what you're focusing on. But if I'm overall just leveraging Canvas apps, I can always have someone else create it for me. So I don't think you need to be an expert in mobile technologies to be able to call yourself a solution architect or to be a better solution architect. I don't think so. Just know what's out there. The other thing I do advise the solution architects that I train once in a while is to know that just like on the desktop, where we leverage Dynamics 365, applications, or where we leverage applications outside of Dynamics 365 as part of our solution, like SharePoint Exchange and whatnot, there's also applications on the mobile device that you can leverage for your mobile solution for Dynamics 365. Applications that can keep track of time. For example, if you're using field service, be able to report how far you are from a destination and all of that. Applications that, depending on the carrier that you're using or the phone that you're using, they can encrypt data, that can allow you to manage the data inside that device. Like sometimes I get the question about, well, talk to me about mobile data security and how do I secure the information? Well, just secure the mobile. Don't worry too much about the Dynamics 365 information. Worry about the mobile as a whole. So understanding there are solutions out there for mobile device management, that is also important. So branch out of just Dynamics 365, learn about the mobile application as a whole. You don't need to be an expert in mobile device management to recommend the fact that they can use mobile device management in order to protect the Dynamics 365 data. So once again, being an expert in mobility, overrated. Knowing some stuff and the capabilities of it, that's good to have. All right, final on our list, and this might be, again, a bombshell, depending on what conference you have attended lately, but Azure. I think being an expert in Azure is totally overrated. I know that Azure is the golden goose of Microsoft, and that they report triple whatever digit growth quarter after quarter, and that Azure is the best thing ever. And by the way, I love Azure. I think it's cool. I saw someone with a sticker once that says my other computer is a data center. It was an Azure sticker. Man, I want one of those. If anyone's listening to this and know where I can get those stickers, let me know, because I want one. So that was cool. But I don't think you need to be an expert on everything Azure. I mean, obviously, there are things in Azure we can leverage as part of Dynamics 365 and as part of your solution that you should know about. You should know a little bit at least. For example, the data export service is good to know about, because you can create a replica of your Dynamics 365 database on a Azure SQL database, and then leverage, let's say, your SQL-based reports or integrations to that database. If you're not pushing anything to it because it's read-only, it's good to know that you can create a replica and read from it. That's good to know. It is good to know that you can do, for example, in Azure, you can host files that you can strip out of emails and push to Azure Blob Storage. You can also do that through SharePoint, depending on the solution that you're leveraging for that. It's good to know that in Azure, you can leverage Azure to migrate to CRM Online, right? Depending on the number of custom or users you have, depending on what kind of version of Dynamics 365 or Dynamics CRM you have, you can leverage Azure, and through Lifecycle Services and Microsoft, you can actually move to the cloud through Azure. So there are things in Azure that are good to know, but you don't need to be an expert on it. Like, for example, I know I can use Azure Hybrid Connections in order to integrate with systems that are behind a firewall or not available through the internet. Do I know how to set them up? No, I work with people who can set that up, but I know that it's out there. I know that it's possible, right? I know that you can pay extra through Azure to get a better connection to data centers. So if you have performance issues with Dynamics 365, you can actually leverage ExpressRoute from Azure to connect to the data center with a faster speed and get better performance. I know that. But do I know how to set that up? No, I will work with somebody else that can do it for me. So again, just having kind of a broad knowledge of the functionality is good. Being an expert on that functionality, totally overrated. Again, I think some people will disagree. I think some of you will think that you must be an expert in Azure if you want to call yourself a solution architect. No, I don't think so. Obviously, there's other architects out there, enterprise architects, technical architects. They can be experts on it. I don't think you have to be an expert on it. So that is my last item on my top 10 overrated skills for solution architects. Thank you so much for tuning in to episode 60 of the CRM MVP podcast. If you have any questions or comments for this episode, please leave it below or send me an email at info@crmmvppodcast.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our show. Follow us on Twitter for news about the show and obviously future episodes as well. And all of our episodes are available at crmmvppodcast.com.